So open for motions for vice chair.
I move that we appoint Commissioner Pierce as vice chair.
I don't think your mic's on.
Hmm?
I don't think your mic's on.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd just like to ask a procedure. The green light's on. Does that make it on?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to ask a procedural question. I don't know who has not been vice chair yet on this group. Isn't that normally how you rotate to people who haven't been vice chair yet?
It sort of is out of the mix now. It used to be rotational according to districts, and then we changed that a couple of years ago. It changed up on its own. So there is no actual. And then usually what we find is it's better to have somebody in a vice chair position that's not familiar with chairs. So we don't have a chair that hasn't had some experience. So then usually a vice chair gets moved up to chair sometimes. So but there's no actual real procedure.
Yeah. And I'm not aware,
Yeah. There's no
didn't know
actual
of any
procedure.
specific procedure. I was just looking at the procedures for the transaction of business. I don't believe that it's addressed in the procedures that we have.
Right. And actually our last chair before this vice chair took over as chair was in for 2 terms or two consecutive times. So yeah, there is no particular thing.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
And then this vice chair will only serve for the next 3 months, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a
actually.
3-month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the vice chair is filling out the chair's term, vice chair would come in filling out the vice chair's term, Dan's term, and then we all come back to a vote in January.
In January, anyway. Okay,
Mhm,
so it's
yeah.
just a short period. Okay, all right.
Mhm.
Thank you. I just didn't know what the history was and how you actually fill the
Mhm.
chair seats. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
So we have a motion for, who you say?
Commissioner Pierce.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll second it then.
Was there any public comment on this one? Is there anybody from the public that wants to comment on this one?
Really, we have public comment on votes? Okay.
I
Any
don't-
public comment? No? Okay, we'll close public comment. All in favor of Pierce being chair or vice chair? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was hard. Okay, so until Dan gets here, let's get rolling. So first, let's go to the Pledge of Allegiance. And Pat, could you lead us?
Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Let the record show all the commissioners except Mr. DeVries are absent, or here, and he is absent. Then consent agenda.
With public comment on any other
Okay,
issues?
public comment, yeah. Okay, do we have public comment? You have any member of the public that is anything that's not on the agenda? You have 3 minutes to speak about anything that's not on the agenda. And please state your name and your residence for the record.
My name is Michelle Lee, and I live at 291 Old Ranch Road. I'm sure all of you got a dissertation of sorts from me in the last few days, whether or not you've had the chance to read that. I realize that there's a lot of information there. We've been before the Board of Commissioners, we've been before the Planning Commission before, and we're very vocal in the community. Everybody kind of knows who we are and the history of this. I guess it's important for me tonight to be here to continue the human element of this. I don't want anyone to think we're looking to eliminate our neighbor or his business. We're not looking for preferential treatment, but we're looking for some resolution and or clarity because we kind of feel like we're in the same spot that we were 3 years ago. We've been patient. We've tried to let the process work, and I think the letter speaks for itself, and I won't continue on that. I said at the Board of Supervisors meeting, the mom in me gets frustrated with this because I've got a kid with hearing aids that can't sleep at night because of the noise. The point of bringing that element up is just the reality that it's just too loud, and the hopes that people understand we're not trying to be unreasonable, we're not trying to be unfair, we're not looking to shut him down in the slightest. We moved next to an event center. We knew what the parameters of that use permit were when we moved there. We just want those parameters to be enforced, specifically with regards to the noise. I think that's fair. I think it's reasonable. We're always available for questions. We're always available for people to come to our property. We've tried to be an open book. Anybody that knows Bill gets fired up. And he has every reason to be. But we're really trying to be patient, and we're really trying to be reasonable on this. And it's just important for me to know that you guys understand that. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you for speaking, and I see on your application that you're asking that this be agendized.
With regards to the letter, yes, that was the formal request.
Okay, and Byron, is this scheduled for anything in the board?
It is not currently scheduled. If you request, there are meetings scheduled to discuss the issue, but no public meetings scheduled to discuss it. If this commission wants to agendize it for a future meeting, we'll put it on an agenda.
Okay, let's agendize it for the next meeting. Okay, and Vice Chair relinquishes to the chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Pierce. My apologies for being late, everyone. There was an accident on 156. I live in San Juan Bautista, as some of you know, most of you know. There was an accident on 156, and it delayed me in arriving on time, so my apologies. So where are we?
Public comment.
Public comment? So was that a comment that was not on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. And was it regarding Leal?
Yes.
Okay. Just as well that I was late because I have a conflict with that, as you and your wife know, because I'm an attorney and I represent Leal Vineyards, so I can't deal with that anyway. So in the future, if it is agendized, just heads up, I'm conflicted out of that. Okay. Any other public comments for tonight's meeting? Okay. Public comment is therefore closed. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes and the certificate of tonight's meeting?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Did you guys pledge allegiance and everything already? Okay. All right, great. So the first thing that I have is number 5 on the agenda, which is the owner applicant in San Benito County regarding 2633 John Smith Road. Is that right, Byron?
Yes.
Okay.
This request is to amend the county zoning ordinance to create a new combining an overlay zone called Resource Recovery Park and apply this new zone to this specific site, defining the permitted, conditional, and prohibited uses and applicable development standards within the newly created zoning district. The intent of the RRP combining overlay zone is to provide increased private business opportunities to facilitate temporary solid waste storage, transfer, treatment, processing, source separation and recovery, disposal, materials recycling, reusable item centers, recycled content manufacturing, construction and demolition materials, sort lines, wood and green waste grinding facilities, energy and gas recovery projects, and similar uses within the unincorporated San Benito County. At this time, I'll turn it over to Steve Peterson, the county's consultant on this item. This is the public hearing to hear public testimony on the draft environmental impact report. We will be responding to any comments that we received tonight as part of the final environmental impact report, which is intended to come back before this commission at the next meeting.
Okay, and just so we can be clear, the comments as regards to the draft EIR can not only just be in the form of verbal statements made tonight, but it can be in the form of letters and I mean, however they contact you, the public is able to comment now at this stage.
Yes, yeah, this is the time for comment, whether it be, this is the public hearing portion of it, but we can accept letters throughout the whole public comment period. Tonight isn't necessarily the venue to debate the merits of the project, is to comment on the environmental document.
Okay, excellent.
And question first. So when is the actual close date on comments for the workshop period?
November 14th
14th?
at 5 p.m.
Thank you.
All right, Steve,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Steve Peterson with Environmental Stewardship and Planning, your county's consultant for the Resource Recovery Park environmental process. I'm joined by my colleague Ashley Harley, who is going to be taking copious notes as the public hearing evolves. What I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, is to walk you through a brief presentation of what the project is, also to put a little bit finer point on what Mr. Turner said regarding public comment, and then with that open it up to begin the public element of this process.
Okay, excellent. Let's do it.
Okay, so the proposed project has been changed from the original submittal that the county made about 3 years ago. That project has been modified by the county in response to public comment. And now the single item that's brought forward and considered within the project environmental impact report is a zoning change. And as Mr. Turner mentioned, what that zoning change would do would facilitate the development of a resource recovery facility both on the county's property on John Smith Road, but also it would provide that opportunity in other locations within the county to provide that overlay that could be added to another base zoning. The intent of the Resource Recovery Park project is, again, to facilitate solid waste source separation recovery, taking recycled materials and manufacturing them into other products, upgrading or upsourcing, if you will. Also provide an opportunity for energy projects related to landfill gas, and also the reuse of materials such as construction materials and other materials that could be sold at that location. Again, the location is south of the existing John Smith Road landfill on John Smith Road, and I think most of the folks in the audience are familiar with that location. Just for a little bit of background, here is a land use map that shows that the area is just about entirely agricultural productive in its land use designation currently. To sort of frame the discussion of the overlay proposal, what we'd like to do is take a second to talk about the county zoning framework. As the commissioners know, zoning is really the vehicle that the county uses to implement the policies of the general plan. And zones, or the zoning map, indicates the areas where certain activities can and cannot occur. So that's the basic framework that the county is exploring a modification of. A combining zone or an overlay zone is the combination of a base zoning designation and another zone on top of it. There are a number of different examples of this within the existing general plan, and I'll go through those in a second. But again, the base zoning for the subject property is agricultural productive and would remain agricultural productive.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yes, sir.
but you said it's agricultural production, or do you mean AR? Isn't it AR out there?
I believe it's AP.
I don't think it's AP. I think it's AR.
It's AP on the south side of the road, I believe.
On the north side of John Smith is AR. On the south side's AP. Okay. Well, it should be just all AR,
Okay.
in my opinion. But I mean, it's cattle land. It's rangeland, right? They don't grow lettuce out there. On John Smith? Where? Way past your place, though. I mean, once you get into Santa Ana Valley, but not where we're talking about here, though. Yeah, okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. So examples of combining zones that are within the existing general plan and the zoning code as it sits today are mineral resources zones, floodplains. That's a situation where a combining zone is used to prevent a use. Scenic highways, again, to control land use in a designated area. For seismic space, safety, and also open space. So this is a tool that's already within the general plan and the zoning framework. And so the proposal would add a new designation to that combining zone list. The environmental impact report process for the Resource Recovery Park has been ongoing for about 3 years. Originally, in 2010, the project was taken forward and an initial document was prepared. Both the original document and the document before you and the public tonight is a programmatic document. That is a base document that establishes the general uses with the anticipation that subsequent projects as they come in will be analyzed by the county as to whether or not there needs to be additional CEQA work done to fit into your responsibilities under CEQA. Again, it provides a framework, and then as a specific project might come forward, that specific project with detailed information as to the design, the operation, and ultimately the decommissioning of a project would come forward and allow the county to study most specifically what those impacts might be for a particular proposed use. But again, the document before you outlines the general parameters with a special focus on cumulative effects and large-scale sort of potential impacts. These are the topic areas that are considered within the environmental impact report. It goes through quite a few different resource areas, and those impact analyses have been modified from the original document in response to both that change in project description that I just described and also public comments that were made on the original document that went forward. Again, in concept, what could happen should your commission recommend certification, and ultimately the Board of Supervisors certifies the document and adopts the overlay for Resource Recovery Park would be a process as depicted on this slide. It shows a conceptual process in which first those actions would take place, and then with a specific development application, there would be a consistency determination by the planning department, by your county, to figure out whether or not a specific proposal is consistent with both the draft ordinance or the ordinance that would be adopted by your county, also would be consistent with the assumptions and the expectations of the programmatic EIR. That CEQA analysis on the proposed development would be a public process, as this is, and would provide your commission and also citizens and other interested parties an opportunity to comment on the specifics of a proposal. With that, it would go forward for Planning Commission decision for taking a project to implementation.
Okay, on that, can you go back to that slide?
Sure.
And can you also scroll up?
Let's see. Okay.
Yeah, that one. Okay. I can't read it right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so what do the windows say there? What do the bubbles say?
I'm sorry. So basically, I'm sorry. This got a little too large for the screen. The top row says Resource Recovery Park zoning and ordinances adopted. The Resource Recovery Program and EIR certified. Those are the current actions anticipated.
Okay.
Future projects, which aren't showing, and my apologies about that, the development application would come forward. A consistency determination would be made by your planning department. The CEQA analysis, if required, of the proposed development would be undertaken by the county. Public comment would be received on that CEQA analysis and the proposal itself, and then ultimately your commission would make a decision as to the consistency of a proposal with both the ordinance and the environmental document.
Okay. Oh, okay, before we go any further, are there any questions from the commissioners about where we are right now? No? We're all good? Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So again, as a matter of history, the original draft was made available in 2010. The final EIR that came from that document was not certified, and at that point, the county determined it wanted to revisit the project description and the approach to respond to public comments. The specific, one of the biggest comments and one of the biggest criticisms at that time was that there was a great concern about changing the land use designation for this property from the ag zoning to industrial. Your zoning code as it sits right now only allows recycling to occur within an industrial area. So the thought that the county originally had was to change that land use designation to industrial to accommodate that. There was great concern about the loss of the agricultural base zoning. The overlay responds to that specific concern. The current document process is as follows. The revised draft EIR was released in September of this year. Tonight's public hearing is, as Byron and as you, Mr. Chairman, noted, one opportunity to comment. The comment period extends through November 14th. Letters, emails are also very acceptable as comments on the environmental document, but that is the sunset for the receipt of those comments.
Okay. November 14th. November 14th is the sunset, as you said.
Yes, close of
So
business.
let's make that real clear. So all public comment needs to be into the planning department by November 14th. And people who don't like this project, people who have something to say about it, whatever you want to do, however you want to say it, November 14th is the date. So write that down. Correct?
Yes, sir. And with that, the schedule as proposed by the department is to come back before you on the 20th of November with the final document, and then take the item, if you're with your direction, to the Board of Supervisors in December of this year or in January of next year.
Okay.
So the business of tonight is really for us to listen collectively and take copious notes. Comments that are made at this session will be recorded. They will also be transcribed by Ashley. We want to make sure that we get the comments correct. We want to make sure that we get your name correct. So we would hope that if you're going to speak, please fill out one of the speaker cards so we get your name spelled correctly. And also, Ashley has the some degree of power, I would think, in the way we propose to run this, in that as she's taking notes, we want to make sure we get it right. So if she is confused about a point that you're making or a statement that you're making, and she doesn't understand it, or basically is trying to catch up, she might hold up her hand and we might ask you to just hold on, and then tell her, she'll ask you if she's gotten it right, because we do want to be accurate. Also, another important note is that comments that were made on the prior document will also be considered within the final document. That is, this is a unified CEQA process in that the entirety of the administrative record will be considered, not just the document before the Commission tonight, but also the prior iteration of the document.
Okay. Excellent.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that you open it for public comment, and look forward to trying to assist you in any way possible.
We shall. Thank you very much, Steve, for your presentation. I appreciate that. And before we do open it up for public comment, I just want to reiterate something that Steve mentioned, and the fact is this, that we're involved in the CEQA process. And Barbara, as County Counsel, let me call upon you to, if I can, and sorry to put you on the spot, but can you emphasize the importance of public comment during the CEQA process? I mean, this isn't just public comments made by the public are not just things that are, like things to go home and think about. I mean, it's very, very important as regards the CEQA process, correct?
Submitting a written comment allows that concern to be taken into account by the agency. If there's valid concerns in the document that haven't been addressed or explained, it would be helpful for those comments to be brought forth. And also just to bring any comments that they would like, also even, anything that they would like to be in the record under consideration, it's important to have it submitted.
That's right. Yeah. So in other words, if someone makes a comment verbally or in writing, it's something that, according to CEQA, must be taken into account by the public agency,
yes,
in this instance, San Bernardino County, in this instance, us. It must be taken into account, correct?
There are certain types of comments that, to the degree of response will depend on the comment that's submitted.
That's right.
But it will be included in the record.
So overall, what we're saying is that the public comments on this John Smith Road Recovery Park thing, these comments are very, very important. Very important. We take them very importantly, and the CEQA process also takes them as being very important as well. So Okay, having said that, are there
Mr.
any?
Chairman, if we
Yeah,
could,
Byron.
right before we take public comment, if we could have Steve from our Public Works Administrator to also comment on the traffic implications of this project, to
excellent.
address that specific issue prior to taking public comment, as I think it's
Excellent.
relevant.
Yeah, yeah. Mr. Steve Witchery from Public Works.
Good evening. How are you doing tonight?
I'm well.
Basically, one of the, call it hot button items before through this whole process has been the condition of John Smith Road and the status of the repairs to John Smith Road as we move forward with the potential project out here. So what I wanted to do was take this opportunity on that particular issue to advise the public and the Planning Commission of where that project currently stands, what we're calling the GAP project, which is the project that falls between the entrance to the landfill and the termination of the John Smith Road realignment project, which will move the intersection of John Smith Road and Fairview to align with the church's parking lot. So that portion of roadway, which is about 2 miles long, between those 2 points, the entrance to the landfill and the termination of John Smith Road realignment project, is actually has been designed. We are looking to go to the board for approval to advertise that project to go out to bid in November. There was a little bit of delay in that process as we were, it's kind of hard to say, unfortunately successful in getting a grant. We had the project designed with standard materials in terms of standard asphalt and so forth. A rubberized asphalt grant came available. We applied for that, and we were successful in that process. So now we're going to be using a rubberized asphalt mixture on the surface of that road, which will actually help quieting traffic and actually will help with the load-bearing capacity of that new asphalt that will go out there. Because that grant was successful, we had to modify our specifications to accommodate that, and we had to delay it a little bit to meet the timelines for that grant because we really can't expend any dollars until the grant becomes totally official through the state process. So that being underway now, we're looking to get approval from the Board of Supervisors to go out to bid on that project in November. Bids will be due near the holidays, after the holidays in January, and work on that project should begin beginning of next year. So I wanted to update on that specific portion because I know that's a hotbed issue for folks who are out there, the condition of the actual road surface that's out there. On that same note, where we're at with the John Smith Road realignment, the portion from that realigns the road, the intersection to the intersection of San Benedict Way, that project, we are in a CEQA issue in terms of trying to mitigate for California tiger salamander. We're in that process. We're trying to work through some different solutions with that aspect of it with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. There may be some movement on the horizon here, and we hope that we can actually have that project go towards construction in spring of next year as well. So I just wanted to update the public on those 2 items.
Okay, before you sit down, so as regards the construction of this recovery park, on the one hand, and as regards your work on John Smith Road, how do those two align with one another?
So
like, will your new road be done before this recovery park gets done? Or are they going to happen at the same time, in tandem, or what's the timing like for that?
What will happen if we're able to maintain this schedule, the GAP project for sure will be done prior to us actually doing any work out in the process, just by the timeline that's being discussed here tonight.
Right.
The CEQA document for the Resource Recovery Park is also scheduled to be completing a process in January, February next year. That's the point in time, weather dependent, which we actually should have a contractor under contract. It may not be actually completed yet, but the contract work will happen in a similar time frame to the acceptance of the CEQA documentation through the Board of Supervisors. The realignment process, it's a little bit more speculative because we're trying to deal with the Department of Fish and Wildlife in terms of mitigation for the California tiger salamander. We have a couple of different tracks. One is looking very positive, and we hope to have that to fruition. But as with anything that you're doing in that kind of process, that could kind of be delayed for any number of reasons, including actually we're being delayed right now because of the federal shutdown because they want to deal with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife as consultation, but with the situation happening in the feds, that department is not operating right now. So there are things that happen out of our control, but our schedule shows that we should have something for that portion, for the realignment portion, going towards the board at the first part of 2014.
So San Benito County has every intention of having this new road that you're describing, that you're in charge of, that you're going to build, this new road in place before the recovery park is actually constructed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Mr. Wittry?
Yes, is that going to be a 4-lane or just going to be 2-lane
It'll be two-lane road. It'll be two-lane road.
with a wide shoulder?
With a standard shoulder. It will not have a bike lane. It'll be a standard county road. It'll be basically an overlay of the existing right-of-way that's out there. It will not be a 4-lane road to accommodate future needs. That's not what the funding is capable of doing. It's a maintenance activity, and therefore it can reconstruct or overlay the existing width of the existing road. So it will be very similar to a project that we did a couple years back on Southside Road, where it was a fairly narrow road, or looked fairly narrow. When the overlay goes on, it's a much safer and wider appearing road because it's structurally sound from shoulder to shoulder, as opposed to some raveling where the asphalt on the edge of the road may have deteriorated over time and the road becomes narrower and narrower. We are going to what the road is actually designed to be. So it will be wider, but only because edges of the road may have deteriorated. And there was also some concern last time, just so I can just add on that a little bit in terms of what level of work we're going to be doing out there. Through the design process, we've actually looked at that, and in terms of the road replacement, there will be sections of the road what's called dug out and deep lifted, essentially, where the road base has actually failed. It's in the contract to remove those areas and fill that with a thick layer of asphalt so that the new compaction to make sure that any kind of trucks that had damaged that existing base will be supported from the new structure for the new road. So,
Oh, that's good. Good to hear. Good to hear. Commissioner Lowe?
No questions.
No questions? Commissioner Pierce?
Yeah.
Feller?
I heard the
Commissioner
word
Pierce?
if, but there's no real guarantees on this
for which one?
for the gap.
No, the gap is funded. The gap is ready to go. The only thing that we need to do is the procedural process of going to the Board of Supervisors to have them approve the plans and specifications and go out to public bid. The Board of Supervisors has the discretion to approve that process in terms of awarding the contract. Those are the two discretionary actions the Board of Supervisors has. It is funded. We anticipate it will go. I can't sit here and tell you it's going to happen because the Board of Supervisors has to make two distinct actions before that can happen.
Right.
The if concerns the timeline for the John Smith Road realignment with Fairview Road, because that deals with another agency out of our control and out of our jurisdiction, frankly. We are dealing with them and trying to work with them in a cooperative manner to try to get authorization from that agency to displace California tiger salamander. That is a holdup that we've had that affects the schedule. The funding for that is done, and it's been in our capital projects budget for several years, and it is locked up. So the funding is there. The if is a timeline on that second project.
Understood, but the gap, I mean, is not part of this project.
The gap has, the board made a specific action to separate the gap as its own project.
And it's its own project, and I mean, this project could go forward, and the gap may not happen. If something else happens, it's not, they don't trigger.
There is no trigger between the two.
Yeah, there's no trigger between the two. So, and in the last couple of years, that's been, like you said, it's been a hot button issue with the public. They're very concerned about it. And putting those fears to rest would be probably a real good start to getting the rest of it put to bed, right?
Right. That's why we're here tonight, to try to allay some of those concerns. It is a separate project. It is a standalone project in our capital improvements project. It is funded. It actually was supposed to be out to bid, but as I said, unfortunately, in one respect to timing, it took a little longer because we were successful in getting a grant for essentially about $175,000. So we thought it would be worth it to the community to continue the process of applying those dollars to help the situation. So.
Okay, excellent. Jeff, anything? No? All right, Steve, thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it. All right, now we're going to open up to public comment. As we mentioned earlier, public comments during the CEQA process are very, very important, and we take them very importantly. So we look forward to hearing from you. Hand your speaker card to the clerk.
Oops, sorry. My name is Barbara Tadeo. I live at 575 Heatherwood Estates Drive. And his comments, I find, I don't want to say he's lying, but during the fair, I sat for a long time and talked to Jerry Munzer and a couple of the other supervisors about how deteriorated that road has become, about the trash. I mean, you'd think because of this meeting tonight that the people at John Smith would at least go by and pick up the trash. The trash is getting so bad that you're trying to swerve around it going into the bumps. There's been sheetrock on that road now for over 6 months. The sheetrock's lasted longer than the repairs. So for him to say that they're going to be making these repairs, when I hear from Jerry Munzer and other board members that no, they're not until the salamander thing gets resolved, this is, to me, you know, a lie. And plus, like I said, you'd think that the John Smith people, to appease the neighbors, would start picking up the trash. There's been a trash bag that I had to move away from the stop sign right at the corner of John Smith and Heatherwood. You know, I had to take out my rubber. I carry rubber gloves in my car now to move trash out of the way that's been dropped on the road. I mean, and it's so disgusting. There's the same black plastic bag right there at the corner, and any of you can drive by there tomorrow and see what we're talking about. There's been old mattresses, there's been cushions from, there's been old blankets. They're still there. They've been there for a month. So my concern is you're talking about all this, you know, the trucks increasing with this project and whatnot, the trash increasing, supposedly then if they have, you know, the recycling. I still keep saying a project like this needs to be closer to 25 and 101, not out in a residential area going up and down 2-lane road. We have a problem now that there's a couple of the truckers that decide to park right there at the corner of Heatherwood and John Smith for an hour or two. And even the cars and trucks are lining up to go in at 6 o'clock in the morning into the landfill. Now, I thought that there was a time frame that they weren't allowed to go, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And this is our concern as neighbors around there, that no one is total disregard for the trash. It's embarrassing for someone to come in from out of town, coming into our area, and it looks like we're in the middle. The trash is atrocious, just atrocious. And like I said, for him to say that after just talking, the fair, what was last week, talking to Jerry for almost a half an hour to find out that no, there's really no plans. And then I said, look, at least do the short gap between Heatherwood and the other. And he goes, oh no, we really can't. We have to do, you know, that's ridiculous. But like I said, environmentally, with all this stuff that's there anyway, it's ridiculous.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, who's next? While Richard's coming forward, I just want to remind the community and everyone here that this Planning Commission did not decide or designate this area to become a recovery park. The Board of Supervisors did that. The San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors has designated this area as being a recovery park. So our job tonight is, as Steve indicated, is to consider the environmental document that goes along with that. But whether or not it should be a recovery park, whether or not it's in the right location, whether or not it should be somewhere else, that's not up to us. That's already been predetermined by the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors. So if anyone has an issue with that or qualms about that, then you're talking to the wrong commission. You got to go talk to the board because they've already decided. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. Richard Betancourt, 4140 Southside Road. As most of you know, I'm on the Monterey Bay Air Advisory Board, and they are moving the monitor from the fire station over to Margaret Mays because they were getting large spikes in PM10s, if I recall. Of course, when they disk the field next to it, they're going to go up. So my concern is, in the EIR, was it taken into consideration not only the PM10s, but also the PM2.5s because of the increase in the trucking going up and down that road? Maybe not so much right now, But when you get people that come up there in the recovery part, has that been taken into consideration? Because as a lot of you guys know, that's how we as planning commissioner, or you as planning commissioners, have to take into consideration when anytime you do any grading or anything like that, you're only allowed so much PM10s and PM.25s to go up into the atmosphere. So has that been taken into consideration? Personally, and my other thought on it is what's going to happen to Mr. Rodriguez's trash collection down at the airport and the one out there by anyway on the west side of across the river there. And I know that they were getting a lot of complaints from the neighbor, from the papers going in there on their property. And then they made an agreement to pick that up. So if this does come about, maybe you should put in that they have to pick up all the trash at the recovery park, has to do it. You know, maybe every day. That's all I got to say.
All right, thank you, Richard. And I think I see Steve taking a lot of notes there, Richard. I think that those comments regarding the air quality are being taken down. So, Shorty, what do you have for us?
My name is Shorty Silva. I live at 4155 John Smith Road. I'm going to ask Mr. Peterson a question, because I may have missed it in EIR, but has Department of Fish and Wildlife been addressed in this EIR, and also the Health Department? I know you say at times maybe each individual is going to go in on its own merits, but we have a large project here that's in a drainage basin, and I do believe the input from Department of Fish and Game is pretty pertinent to, before you approve this and go on with it. You know, you're holding up the realignment of John Smith Road for a tiger salamander and some shrimp. So I think it'd be reasonable to ask that they be brought in on this, and maybe they have. I might have missed it. Have they?
Well, yeah. Let's just do it. Let's just do a timeout. Let's do it through the chair. I can almost, before he even answers, I can almost assure you that yes, Fish and Game has gotten a copy of the EIR, because it goes.
I missed that. That's what I was asking, is Fish and Game and Health Department.
That's correct. But it goes. The EIR goes to this clearinghouse thing, and then everybody gets to comment on it, including Fish and Game. Is that right, Steve? Okay. So the EIR has gone to the EIR clearinghouse, and when it goes to the clearinghouse, then anyone and their brother can comment on it from any California type of agency that's able to comment upon it, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. And also, just to make you, your commission, and the public aware, we worked with your staff in meeting with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Mr. Silva, if he worked at our office, would be fined $1 right now, because they changed their name last year, and everyone who calls it Fish and Game has to pay $1.
I just spent $2.
All joking aside,
I just spent $2.
All joking aside, Mr. Silva is correct that the property is actually in the vicinity of the road improvements that Mr. Witry was describing, and that within the document, within the biological section, you'll find a discussion of the potential for those species to be impacted, as well as the presence of waters and wetlands that are jurisdictional under federal Clean Water Act statutes, which is also another biological consideration. But yes, the state clearinghouse ensured that this document came to the Department of Fish and Game, and I think we can be confident that we'll receive some comments on them, as we always do on just about every CEQA document.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Shorty, sufficiently? Okay. So it goes to this clearinghouse thing, and then everybody gets to comment on it, from the state, from the feds, all those guys. So we may be hearing from them. If they do have a comment, Steve, let me ask you this, Steve. If Fish and Game, I just spent $1, didn't I? If Fish and if Fish and Wildlife does have a comment, or if you do get comments back, when can we expect to get those? And if you do get one, what will be your response?
Well,
How does that all work?
there's a long tradition of receiving Fish and Game and Caltrans comments about an hour before the close of the comment period.
Right.
So realistically, we expect to get them at the very end. So I would expect that we would hear from state agencies. We've gotten one comment letter in from the Department of DTSC, but with that, we would expect to get those near the end of the comment period. As with every other comment on this process, we need to consider it very seriously and respond to it fully. If there are issues that need to be resolved, we would meet with them and discuss, possible resolution to their concerns. But in essence, as a responsible agency, they hold sway. They have a very strong position within the CEQA process, and if they're not satisfied, they will become remonstrators, and they will, in fact, let the county know of its feelings.
Okay. So in terms of Shorty's question, A, yes, Fish and Wildlife, it has been notified. They've got a copy of the AR and so forth. B, they're going to be provided with an opportunity to comment. C, you think that might come in around November 14th?
Typically, we receive state agency comments near the end of the comment period.
Which is November 14th, correct?
And Mr. Chairman, an important point is the timing that I showed you on the slide presentation is conceptual. If there are significant issues that need to be resolved, obviously we would work with your staff to try and resolve them, with state agencies or the public to get the best solutions proposed within the environmental document.
And are the comments from, like, let's say, Shorty's concerned about Fish and Wildlife. Let's say they do provide a comment, and let's say it's on November 13th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. How transparent is that whole process to the public? How will he and Tammy and his family know about that?
The format of the final EIR will be any corrections or addenda that are identified through the comment process. And then each one of the comment letters, each one of the comments made this evening, each one of the comments
There was another speaker. Are you ready, ma'am?
Melinda Casillas, 4505 John Smith Road. I have a question, and perhaps I just missed something along the way. Mr. Witry was explaining the road improvements between John Smith and the landfill, and I was just curious, what are the intentions between the landfill entrance and the entrance to the recovery park? Because that road narrows into kind of an oversized one-lane road on a blind curve. And so I was wondering if there were any plans for improvements on that road, that portion of the road.
Okay, good question. Good question. Steve, can I let you field that one? And that's kind of interesting for me too. In other words, starting at Fairview, how far east, I guess, on John Smith Road do your improvements that you described go?
So the GAP project as was currently designed ends immediately past the current entrance to the landfill. If this process goes forward for Resource Recovery Park is approved and goes forward and becomes a project into the future, that will require improvements to the John Smith Road from that point to a point past the entrance to the new Resource Recovery Park.
That's where the improvements will stop? So you're gonna have this really nice, beautiful rubber asphalt road from Fairview just to the past the recovery park, and then past that, then it's gonna be like bumpy county old country road. How come you guys can't go all the way?
Money.
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 Okay.
And basically, what we have to do is
all it takes is money, right?
All it takes is money. I can pay the world with enough money. That's all it really takes. But basically, the vast majority of the traffic goes to the landfill or to the Resource Recovery Park, presumably in the future. Okay. Beyond that is not much other than ranches.
Okay. Does that answer your question, ma'am? What I hear the Director of Public Works saying is that there's going to be improvements from Fairview to the dump, and then if this whole recovery park thing gets approved, which I think it's going to, frankly, then Steve will increase the area of these road improvements to stretch to the entrance of the recovery park.
It'll go beyond the entrance to the new.
But then just past the recovery park, that's going to be the weird thing. Just past the recovery park, the improvements are going to stop. So you're going to be on like a really nice rubber asphalt, brand new road, and then it's just going to change to old county road thing.
Our current standards, great.
Yeah, correct. So that's the way it's going to be. Thank you, Steve. All right. Any other public comments? Tammy.
Tammy Jackson, 3503 John Smith Road. I had a couple questions. I think Byron had mentioned that all the other agencies had had a chance to talk about this. Has the health department made their comments? Because somewhere in the EIR or the draft EIR, it says something about pumping and hauling and that you guys are going to use tanks and no septic system, if I read that correctly. And when I talked to Daryl a while back, he said that there was going to have to be septic systems put in because of the buildings with employees and that sort of thing, handicapped bathrooms. So I just had a question on where that pump and haul came from. Also, if CAL FIRE has been approached or included in the comments. Very concerned about fire protection out there. Talk about grinding, all the different businesses and things that are going to be going on out there. It's all grassland, and a small fire could be disastrous to a lot of people out in the valley. Also talks about, it talked about some of the different resources or that will cause excessive noise. Wondering if we can't just put a stipulation that all that stuff will be done inside, like some of the other resource recovery parks where the grindings and different things are all done inside of a building to mitigate noises. Somewhere in the draft DIR it talked about night work would be limited because of something. I don't remember what. There's 320 pages. It's a lot to remember. Wondering if we can't put some, and we've talked about this before, if we can put limitations now so that we don't have to be doing this for the next 2 years for every single person that comes in and proposes a business. For instance, limiting the hours, the signs at John Smith Road, the hours clearly are not followed. There are trucks there as early as 5 o'clock in the morning waiting to go in. Sometimes the other night, the gate was open at 7 o'clock, and it wasn't for construction. There were still trucks going in. Wondering if we can just put some limits on that now before we go any further. Water, wondering what we're doing with water. They're still trucking in potable water for dust mitigation, and I'm not understanding why, if we're talking about recycling, why are we using good water for dust? Why are we not tapping into the wells that are there? Why is water being paid for? And then lastly, we've asked this numerous times, who's going to enforce these rules, such as hours, night glare? I know that Foster Farms, neighbors of Foster Farms has had some huge issues. There's nobody to get a hold of until the next business day when they can call someone at the county offices. And is there going to be a phone number posted somewhere of someone who will actually answer a phone and take care of these issues if it happens on a Friday, so we don't have to wait clear till Monday? And then one last thing is the drainage for Mr. Witry. Right now, there's that big drainage pipe that just comes right out and sometimes floods the road. When you guys redo the road, will that be taken care of and rerouted somewhere else, or is that still going to always be a problem?
So Tammy, before you walk back, so I've got, I just was writing a list of your concerns. Was the health department consulted? CAL FIRE, were they consulted? Noise, water, code enforcement, and drainage.
Right.
Is that basically it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
You bet.
Excuse me, through the chair.
Yes.
Tammy, the pipe that you're talking about is coming out of the dump?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. It comes down right at the entrance on the left-hand side as you're driving in. They have sandbags right now.
Okay, so why don't we do this if I can? Pardon me? Yeah, let me do this if I can. I'm going to have Steve, the environmental consultant, address the first four things, which are, was the health department consulted in CAL FIRE, the noise issue, and also water, because I think that kind of falls all within your wheelhouse. And then Byron, you can talk about code enforcement, and then if necessary, Steve Witry can talk about that drainage issue. Okay, let's do that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. First, related to the sewage strategy employed in this document, the county provided us with the pump and store strategy, and that's something that I believe Mr. Turner and Mandy worked with the health department as well as engineering to evaluate what was the most appropriate strategy for that site. If there are any detailed questions related to the engineering, I think Mr. Witry probably could respond to those, but that's something that was brought forward by the county into the document based on their cooperation, their collaboration with other agencies, including, I believe, the health department. So I'm seeing a nod, yes. So
But as to just the real basic question, was the health department consulted or involved with this process? The answer is yes.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
With CAL FIRE, again, in going through the state clearinghouse, that's one of the agencies that would receive a document of this type, and we expect to get comments from CAL FIRE, and they may or may not elect to comment, but that's something that they have the opportunity to do. As for excessive noise, there's a noise analysis contained within the impact analysis, and that's based on largely outdoor activities. There's no noise controls that are promulgated within the proposed ordinance or within the document itself to mitigate impacts. Having said that, every use that comes forward would expected to be compliant with the county noise ordinance. And again, as folks are reviewing the environmental impact report, it's also important to review the proposed ordinance as well. And that would be a likely place if you have suggestions for modifications. That's where that would be an appropriate place to comment.
Okay.
Again, with the hours of operation and with water, hours of operation, a lot of the governance portions of this process are not defined in a programmatic EIR. It's the expectation of the county staff that we've been working with, as well as our group, that when a specific project comes forward, that's really where the rubber meets the road. In that a specific project will trigger a lot of different things related to landscaping, building design, the form of the buildings, as well as things like the hours of operation. So we would expect that to be defined at a subsequent date.
Okay.
But again, that would be a public process, and we would look forward to the county working closely with area residents as well as the proponents of the project.
Correct. Okay.
And
All
I
right.
think that's it from my list, unless I've missed something.
No, I think that is it for you, and I think that your last comment was a good segue to the director of building and planning to talk about code enforcement. Because basically, when Tammy Jackson says, "What if they don't abide by the hours?" or "What if this doesn't happen or that doesn't happen?" That's an issue of code enforcement, correct?
We would treat it just as we do every other business and every other discretionary action. It'll have, the operations out there will have conditions that will allow the commission to potentially revoke or modify the permits that are granted for uses out there. Obviously, not everybody plays by the rules. We expect them to, but not everybody plays by the rules of the conditions of approval that they're given. So that's why we put that condition in there, so we can bring things back to the commission. And as you saw earlier this evening, a member of the public came and asked for a specific approval to be brought back to this commission to review, and the commission chose to agendize it. So it would be the same. It would be the same process.
Okay. All right. So just to translate that a little bit, Tammy, the issues regarding enforcement of hours of operation and all of the stuff that you mentioned, we all refer to that at the county as code enforcement, like enforcement of the rules. And to be really honest with you and really frank and really transparent, the county's stretched a little thin right now as regards code enforcement. I think Byron would agree with me on that, because there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of businesses and there's a lot that code enforcement needs to do. So is it going to happen every time you said, like, if I call someone on Friday, maybe something doesn't get done until Monday? Yeah, I mean, that might be true. But there's really nothing else we can do. All we can do is really kind of make the rules, and then it's up to enforcement to enforce the rules. But in these economic times, with the county stretched as thin as it is, code enforcement it's a tough thing. Does each business need a conditional use permit? No, not every business needs a conditional use permit. I mean, that's kind of a broad question.
Depends on the use.
Tire recycling, let's say, and they say that their permit allows them to be open from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, and suddenly they're open on Saturday and Sunday. Is there a permit that can be revoked so that they
And Mr. Chair, we're not able to pick this up on the record, so we're not able to respond to these comments if you don't give them at the microphone.
That's true.
So, question for if these businesses, as they each come in, you're talking about that they need to get certain permits. Will they be required to have a conditional use permit? So that if their permit says, like, remember El Moderno Nursery got in trouble years ago for not operating beyond its business hours, and a neighbor was concerned and they got in trouble? So is each of these businesses going to have a conditional use permit stating specific rules depending on what their business is? And then that's the recourse that you can take, is to revoke their use permit so that they could no longer be practicing their business if they're not following the rules?
Well, like I said when you were sitting back there, that's a pretty broad question, and it's hard to answer it generically. Not all businesses require a CUP.
Okay, so they're not going to all be required.
But those businesses that do require a CUP, if this planning commission, or if the county of San Benito has granted that permit based upon certain conditions, number one, and number two, if they violate the conditions, then yes, then the permit can be revoked.
Okay, but there's not a set fast rule on who's going to be required to have a conditional use permit? So someone could go in without having to go through that process as a business?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Mr. Chair?
Isn't that Barbara?
I'd like to ask a question from
I know, but hold
them
on,
too.
Commissioner Pierce, hold on just one second. Isn't
I'm
that-
going to say something. It's just because it doesn't, a use doesn't require a use permit, though, doesn't mean it can break air quality rules or noise ordinance
that's
rules
right.
or
That's right. You
zoning
can't-
rules,
that's right.
regardless of whether you have a discretionary permit or not.
That's exactly right. But I think Tammy's question was, does every business in San Benito County require a conditional use permit? And the answer is no.
That's correct.
You do not need a conditional use permit.
We don't even have business licenses in San Benito County.
That's right. But your point is that just because you don't need a CUP doesn't mean you can't break the law. You still have to abide by the law.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Culler.
I'm not sure if I mean, Tammy would be the one to answer that, but the way I understood her was she was asking if a conditional use permit is going to be required for all businesses operating at the Resource Recovery Park.
Oh, only at the Resource Recovery Park?
Correct.
Because those are the ones that
I'm sorry.
she's concerned
Thanks,
about.
Jeff.
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about countywide. Will all businesses...
Chair's
Okay.
permission, can we have Ms. Murphy from the County Council's office maybe weigh in a little bit on these issues?
Yeah, for sure. But let's just frame the question here a little bit. So the question, thank you, Commissioner Culler. The question is, will the businesses, the individual tenant businesses at the Resource Recovery Park, will each one of those businesses be required to have a CUP?
So, yes, Shirley Murphy, Deputy County Counsel. The draft ordinance for the Resource Recovery Park zoning, combining zone overlay district is set forth in Appendix B to the draft EIR. And if you read through there, it outlines how the permitting process will occur. And painting with a very broad brush, if uses are conducted wholly within an enclosed building, those uses will be subject to an administrative permit. And then certain uses that, again, painting with a broad brush, are those uses but not within a wholly enclosed building, those would be required to, those would be subject to a use permit. Now, in terms of conditions that could be imposed, the proposed Section 25.17.101 specifies under Section D that all uses shall be subject to project-specific California Environmental Quality Act, which by its nature means they're not ministerial. They would be discretionary, and therefore the Planning Commission or the board, if it were appealed to the board, could impose conditions of approval on pretty much every use within the Resource Recovery Park, at least as it's drafted in its current form.
Okay, so let's take that all down to as to the simple question: will the tenants of the Resource Recovery Park each one be required to have a conditional use permit? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. So the answer is
And
yes.
furthermore, with the county being the landlord, the county has more direct enforcement capabilities than it would for doing code enforcement against private party.
That's a good
And
point.
let's clarify, not necessarily a conditional use permit, but some level of permitting, not necessarily a conditional use permit.
Okay.
Yeah, conditional use permit is a bit of a term of art, but I believe the administrative permits would be subject to conditioning as well.
Okay.
And I also wanted to, at this moment, say that, we wanted to, we mentioned before that this point of this meeting was to take public comment on the environmental document,
Right.
not to debate the merits of the project.
That's
That is
right.
the next meeting that we'll be doing that, so I just
That's
wanted
right.
to point that out.
That's right. Good point. Yes, ma'am. You have to come to the podium. Thank you, Shirley, for that.
Okay, my question then, under code enforcement, doesn't the present, operators of the dump have specific hours that they're supposed to operate? I'm thinking environmentally also, the dust and the dirt and whatnot, so that's how it ties in with this whole thing. And here they're starting to let trucks and whatnot come through, trucks lining up at 5:30 and trucks going in at 6 o'clock in the morning. Isn't that in violation of their code enforcement hours of operation? So when we're talking all of this code enforcement, coming for the new businesses, when the current, people at the dump are not even following what their hours of operation are supposed to be. You understand what I'm trying to say?
I do.
So, but yet no one has fined them, given a reprimand letter from the planning commission, anyone. So then how are we going to, when the traffic increases and everything else, are they going to start lining up on John Smith with their diesel trucks running like they're doing now, earlier because they can't get into where they need to be?
Okay.
And so why haven't the current dump been fined for not following their code enforcement for hours of operation?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mandy, do you want to respond to that at all or no? Yes? Okay. I guess the question is, does the dump follow the rules? And if they don't follow the rules, what are the ramifications? I think that's basically the question.
Well, obviously, there are other agencies that regulate the landfill. The state of California does the inspections and regulates John Smith Road landfill. The landfill hours of operation for commercial vehicles is sunrise to sunset. For the public, it is Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 3. But for commercial vehicles, they're allowed in sunrise to sunset. So I think that there may be some confusion there. I can't speak to, I'm obviously not there, 24 hours a day, so I don't know exactly, but there are surveillance cameras. So we've used that on many occasions. Some people in this audience know that. We're able to check some of those things if someone brings it to our attention that day, or within the next 3 days, within a week, we can check those things if someone's abusing that. But if you have a complaint about the landfill, CalRecycle is the place to lodge that complaint because they are.
CalRecycle?
Yeah, that's the state agency that oversees the operation of all solid waste facilities in the state of California.
So, dear CalRecycle, I live in Heatherwood Estates, and here are my complaints. And I can write a letter to somebody?
Right. We can get that information's available. I mean, I can get that information, anybody who wants it, and they
Okay.
come out once a month or more frequently if there are complaints.
Okay.
So
did you hear that, ma'am? If you have
can get you their
if you
address,
have
yeah.
complaints about the dump, because earlier you mentioned trash and hours of operation and noise and all that other stuff. If you have complaints, it sounds like the person to whom you should address those complaints is CalRecycle, and Mandy.
I'll get you the address.
Mandy here will give.
I do. I can write it down for you. I know,
Mandy
yeah.
here will give you the address.
Pardon?
So the question is for the video and for the tape, for the recording. The question is, why are the hours different for commercial versus residents of San Bernardino County?
And
I believe that's an accommodation for businesses
yeah,
and
I
across
just,
all landfills.
Go ahead, Barbara. What?
yeah, I just want to make sure that we are staying on the agenda as much as, and that we don't delve too much into any items that aren't on the agenda today.
No, I understand. This will take a second though. We're not going too far afield.
So again,
My concern is more Brown Act. We've got an agenda, and the agenda spells out what we're discussing. I mean, how far off can, and a little off is not a problem, but.
Okay, so there's been a concerns expressed by County Council, by Commissioner Lowe, that we're getting too far afield off the agenda. As to why, the question was, why are hours different for commercial than it is for residents? Mandy Rose is here. She runs the dump or the landfill or whatever. So if you want to have answer to that question, maybe you can talk to her after the meeting. Let's do it that way. Okay?
I also just wanted to make sure that something was on the record, that the board hasn't made any final determination regarding this issue. It's going to, that there's been no final decision regarding this about whether this will actually occur. I mean, they've gone through with the environmental process and as far as investment in the environmental report, but nothing's finalized and no final determination is made until the EIR is certified and there's actually an ordinance adopted. So things could still, it's still for the board's consideration. I just want to make sure, I'm sure that the planning commission already knows that. I just want to make sure that that's clear for the public.
Okay. Okay, great. Any other public comment on this agenda item, which is the draft EAR of the landfill, or the recovery park, I'm sorry. If there are none, then the next agenda item is the general plan update discussion and the status of the general plan update, which I assume, Byron, you're going to do?
You need to formally
I'm sorry.
close public.
I did.
Did you close the public hearing?
Yeah, I
I'm sorry.
did.
Okay.
Okay, the next item, I've been asked to give regular updates on the progress of the general plan update, both at the board and at the planning commission. At this point, we have received proposals to pick up the job and to move it forward. I'm assembling a team of qualified people to review and rank and score the proposals at this time. After they are scored, we will schedule an interview with the top ranked firm and talk about contract items with them before taking it before the board for their approval of any contract with a new consultant. At that point, then, after a contract is approved, we'll get into the next business, which is having the joint meeting that was discussed with both the planning commission and the board, and moving forward in that direction.
Excellent, excellent. Are there any planning commissioner comments? Commissioner Lowe?
No. None.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, anyone else? As we discussed last time, or as I think I mentioned last time, I think that one of the things that we can improve upon going forward with the general plan update process is that the planning commission play a more active role. And I've talked about that with Director Turner, and I've talked about that with some board members, and everyone seems to be in agreement with that concept. So, Byron, what I'd say is this: that we look forward to every single meeting, having an update from you. Where are we? How are we doing? What can we do to help? Because we're all here, we're all available. We all care about the process a lot, and we're available to help. And I think that's one of the things that, I'm not being critical of the past, but I think that's one of the things that maybe could have been done differently in the past, is more planning commission involvement. So we're here, and we look forward to your updates in the future on every occasion, on every meeting. Okay, well, one thing I noticed on the agenda is that we need to appoint a vice chair. Did you guys skip over that? Oh, who was appointed? Commissioner Pierce is vice chair. Okay, excellent. All right, fantastic. Good. So if are there any other planning commissioner comments?
I second it.
There's a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much.